Hello, welcome, and salutations to Den of Otaku, Den of Geek's official anime discussion series where we break down all things anime, Japanese pop culture, all the biggest developments going on in the industry. I am your host, Daniel Kurland, and in this episode, well, let me ask you a question, fellow Otaku. Have you ever felt like you're just having one of those days? One of those Sakamoto days, that is. Yes, we have still got Sakamoto fever over on Den of Otaku, and so we are going to talk about just the inherent perks of part 2 of Sakamoto Days, whether it's the character arcs and developments that lie ahead for the characters, the influx of versatile villains and how they add to the series, and how Sakamoto Days is really heading into one of its most important story arcs that becomes a big turning point for the series. So grab your parrots, let's head to an amusement park because it's Sakamoto time, baby. Hey there, fellow otaku. We are big fans of Sakamoto Days over on Den of Otaku here. And in the past, though, when we've talked about Yuto Suzuki's Sakamoto Days, it's kind of been in the broader context of the shonen genre as a whole, kind of how Suzuki's storytelling has evolved over time, the growing trends of assassin and spy storytelling in the shonen genre. And I think all of that is fascinating context for Sakamoto Days. It plays a big factor in why this show has kind of become so popular, and how it feels almost like it's built off of an algorithm's checklist of just hitting all the popular things right now, even though that's not how it was made. It just very naturally hit these points, and I think that's why it has really succeeded and come along at the perfect time. And as exciting as Sakamoto Days Part 1 is, there is a real glee of when an anime like this heads into Part 2, because you really get to get deeper into the characters, you get more storytelling that takes bigger risks, and in my opinion, Part 2 of Sakamoto Days gets into more important storytelling than what was present in Part 1. This is really when Sakamoto Days starts to come together, and that is exciting, whether you are a fan of the first part, whether you're coming into this new, but now is when Sakamoto Days really gets exciting. Part 1 of Sakamoto Days really kind of focused on the schism that existed between Sakamoto's past life as an assassin and his current retired life as a husband. And a lot of the conflict stems from his life as it stands now and the wife that he cares about being put in harm's way. Now, at the same time, he's kind of building a found family at the same time with people like Shin and Lu and just other assassins that he meets along the way. What's interesting is Part 2 doesn't abandon his actual family that he has in Part 1, but it really starts to evolve the found family aspect. You really dig deeper into the chemistry that's present between Taro, Shin, and Lu, and just how that continues to evolve. You see characters in flux, they're put into different roles than they would have been before, and it's really kind of just rewarding to see this central dynamic continue to change. And at the same time, because the audience understands these characters a little better and that they've spent more time with them, you are allowed to kind of do bigger emotional asks that wouldn't have been possible back in Part 1. And at the same time, when you see these characters in peril, it means a lot more than it did back in Part 1, now that these characters have a deeper relationship with you. At the same time, it's not taking those relationships for granted, but it really does take advantage of some of the ideas in Part 1 that weren't exactly paid off and can now kind of evolve and really become more interesting. If you like the characters when Sakamoto Days started, all of that really gets more exciting and kind of blows up in rewarding ways that doesn't just push Sakamoto out of his comfort zone, but pushes all of these characters out of their comfort zone. And that's just an exciting turn of pace for the show.
情丝
Sakamoto Days really values the relationships between the protagonists in the show and the people that are trying to do the right thing, but this is also a show that really has a lot of fun with its villains. And part one really introduces and sets a fun baseline for the type of killers that are in the show, but part two really goes further with all of that, and you get more exaggerated situations and characters. And that's not to say that like characters are suddenly shooting fireballs out of their hands now, but it does build on what's been established, and you really get to see Sakamoto Days establishing its voice and finding like the right rhythm that works best for it. You have a lot of fun experimentation in part one. A lot of that really like solidifies and grows more confident in part two. You have such extreme kind of supporting villain characters and just assassins in general. Like you have a skilled marksman who has a parrot. There's like a human Swiss Army knife person that's kind of like a mix of weapons and is kind of like the show's version of RoboCop. You have another character who like uses tricks to make characters talk backwards all the time. So you have a real fun mix of stuff going on. At the same time too, Shin is a character that was experimented on in a lab, and like it gets into this like elfin lead type of human experimentation sci-fi subplot that you wouldn't have expected to be in Sakamoto Days when the anime begins, but it feels like a really natural development of the show. And at the same time, this is a smart way to give a character powers in a show that doesn't have many powers. And at the same time, it feels organic. It doesn't feel like the show is cheating or going in a completely different direction. All of these villains are really exciting and they add something fun to the picture. Part two has more of that, and it really just builds into that kind of existing anime trope when you have like a rotating cast of just unique supporting villains. Like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, I think, is one of the best shows to handle this. It really has fun with that. Dragon Ball does it too. But even just like we've talked about Yoshiaki Kawajiri in the past, and like if you look at the villains in Ninja Scroll or Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust, they all feel like they're kind of pulled from the same idea that's going on in Sakamoto Days. The difference is though, Sakamoto Days really has one-of-a-kind villains that feel like they couldn't be found anywhere else. Like we've brought up John Wick as a comparison point before, and that is another title that really does a good job of having unique killers, even if they don't say much, just their fighting style can tell you a ton about them. That is all very much present in Sakamoto Days, but I think it really genuinely has characters and situations that you would never see anywhere else. And on that note, just the action set pieces in this show are so incredible. Part one of Sakamoto Days has some famous scenes that are set at like an amusement park or a paintball tournament. There's like fighting dinosaur bones at a museum. There's a subway fight against this like heightened Trigun-esque villain, a motorcycle chase too. Like it really hits all the bases in a way that's genuinely creative. Part two really builds upon that. In my opinion, part two is more battle heavy. It is more back-to-back action in a way that doesn't feel antithetical to what part one was doing, but it does become a more battle heavy show. It feels akin to like when Dragon Ball enters the first tournament arc, or when JoJo's Bizarre Adventure enters Stardust Crusaders. There's a really exciting turning points for those shows, and the fact that Sakamoto Days is in that turning point is so exciting. Like it really ups the ante and shows you that like, okay, you might have liked the show before, but now it's really figured out who it is, what it wants to do, and how to hit those points. And kind of off of that as well, we've talked about the heroes, we've talked about the supporting villains, but on top of all of that is Slur. Slur is Sakamoto Days' ultimate villain. You have assassins that have been attacking Sakamoto. They've been following Slur's orders, and Slur is kind of teased in part one, but part two, even though he's still not fully in the focus of what's going on, you really get to understand him better as a character. He's not just some ominous force, he feels like a real individual now. And that's an important part for any anime too. Like when you really get to know your villain, when you really get to establish who he is, why he's doing these things, that can be a make or break point for an anime. And despite how he's been this really exciting wild card on what we've previously seen, part two really embraces what Slur is all about and why he is such an exciting character. Slur is an exciting villain for all those reasons, but it also kind of like leans into the grander trend that's going on now of villains in shonen series that are kind of these heightened serial killer evil geniuses. Like, it's not just enough to be a powerful opponent or like a vicious murderer. You have to be these heightened, sadistic, artistic, Hannibal-esque characters. Muse from Daredevil, like, there's another counterpoint too. Like, Slur is really dangerous, and all of the villains in Sakamoto Days have been something to celebrate and to feel suspense over, but Slur just ups the quality of danger in this show, and there's genuine tension around him. So that's an exciting element to really develop in part 2 as well, especially since Sakamoto now has more people that he cares about and more to lose. That all becomes ammunition that Slur can use against him.
I understand, Sakamoto. You have a daughter.
Another really exciting thing to consider when it comes to Sakamoto Days Part 2 is just where the story is heading. Maybe you've never read the manga and you're experiencing Sakamoto Days for the first time. That's totally fine. But Suzuki has crafted such a rich story, and the next story arc, the Death Row Prisoners arc, is really the turning point when Sakamoto Days starts to figure out what it wants to do. And we got a bit of a tease of that at the end of Part 1. The final few episodes of Part 1 are the start of the Death Row Prisoners arc, but Part 2 is when these eccentric assassins really strike and get into the nitty-gritty nature of it. The Death Row Prisoners arc is the longest story arc that Sakamoto Days has done so far, so you get to go deeper into serialization. You get to take bigger swings when it comes to storytelling. Again, these are things that might have not necessarily worked back in Part 1, but like, they've earned the audience's trust now, and you can do these bigger risks. And I think just on that level, it's smart to really center Part 2 around the Death Row Prisoners arc and turn that into its centerpiece. It shows that the production understands the value of the story arc and how fans really do love it. It's not being something that's just snuck into the end of something. It's really being celebrated, and that shows that Sakamoto Days understands just what its most important parts of the story are. And so the Death Row Prisoners arc is going to be the focus of Part 2. There might be a little time to get into the JCC transfer exam arc too. This is the following story arc. If they do get into it, we might just get 1 or 2 episodes of Part 2 that are focused on it. It might tease it and set it up to become the future of Sakamoto Days. To not spoil anything about the JCC transfer exam arc, but it is really fun too. Some people do prefer it to the Death Row Prisoners arc. There's pros and cons to each of them, but basically the JCC transfer exam arc, it gets into some really fun undercover work for the main character. You get to dig really deeper into Slur, and there's some great Slur stuff in the JCC transfer exam arc. And you have a whole school that's full of assassins, which is just such a fun idea to get into. More than anything else, though, I think this proves that the best of Sakamoto Days is still yet to come. This isn't a series where it's like hits its best ideas in Part 1 and then is kind of just diminishing returns after that. This is an anime that has a strong start, but continually grows more confident and has only just really gotten started. So you're going to see that in the Death Row Prisoners arc, but if we get a tease of the JCC Transfers exam arc too, that's going to continue that trend. And to be talking about that, I think makes sense to kind of seg into just the future of Sakamoto Days and Netflix. You know, Sakamoto Days has a huge manga. There's tons of manga material to adapt. There are spin-offs to adapt to. All of this is to say this isn't going to be the end of Sakamoto Days on Netflix. During Part 1, 10 of the 11 episodes were in Netflix's top 10 rating. So basically, for 10 of the 11 weeks that Sakamoto Days was airing, it was a top 10 title. That's a huge metric, and it's unlikely that that's going to change during Part 2. If anything, those numbers are going to become even more impressive, since fans already know about the show, they want to see what's happening next, and so it seems only likely that Sakamoto Days is going to become more popular. At the same time, while a Part 3 or a Season 2 hasn't been confirmed, it's gonna happen. Like, you wouldn't commission a project like Sakamoto Days if you weren't in it for the long haul. It is so frustrating when a huge shonen series gets adapted and then just gets canceled after one season. This is not what's going to happen with Sakamoto Days, even if it wasn't successful, but the fact that it is successful kind of guarantees that more of it is on the way. Netflix hasn't confirmed that, but it seems very likely that this is just the start of Netflix's relationship with Sakamoto Days, and that it really could be an anchor for the future of their anime programming. I mean, they've announced a few of their upcoming series, like a Splinter Cell anime, that is very much in line with Sakamoto Days. Like, they have more and more assassin and spy series like Blue Eye Samurai Season 2 too. All of those kind of mesh with what Sakamoto Days is doing, and it's not hard to picture that anime as the anchor of what they're doing. Additionally, it's not unusual for like a popular shonen series to get a cinematic movie, to get a movie version of what they're doing. At the same time, it would be a huge tragedy to have a Sakamoto Days movie that isn't in theaters, but Netflix has been experimenting more with this. Like, they have the Mononoke movie trilogy that they did, so if they took the effort to show that, yes, Sakamoto Days is going to have a movie, but it's going to be exclusive to Netflix, I think that would really show that they're serious about this property, and it would be a huge move to kind of get subscribers to come to Netflix. If they knew that the only way they could watch this movie is on the streaming service, that's going to pull people in. So again, a Sakamoto Days movie hasn't been confirmed, let alone one that's exclusive to Netflix, but I think if they made that path, it would really kind of show more of a future for Netflix, where fans know that this isn't just a service where they can get cutting edge shonen content, but that movies are also going to be a big part of this equation too. So regardless of what the future of Sakamoto Days looks like, it seems like pretty guaranteed that Netflix is going to be doing more with this show, and that the best has yet to come. So please check out part 2 of Sakamoto Days, because this is where the really exciting stuff with Sakamoto, with Slur, with everyone hits it into high gear. Now, unfortunately, fellow otaku, that's all the time we have in this episode. Before I get isekai'd back to reality, we would once again like to thank Netflix for doing what they're doing with Sakamoto Days and to not stop anytime soon. And we want to thank you, fellow otaku, because without you, we've got nothing. Until next time, Space Cowboys.